My name is Porter McRoberts, and we're at the Holy Cross Interventional Spine and Pain Management Procedure Room number 3 and internationalhouseofpain.com, and we're trying today to educate the C-arm user, take them from a general assumption that they know little about how to use a C-arm, and bring them through the mechanics, the safety, safe operation, and then specifics about how to use the C-arm to best visualize pain procedures so that the practitioner has good ease of operation, low dose and low exposure for the patient and him or herself, and so that basically the C-arm operator can walk into any procedure room and operate the C-arm like a professional. So today I've got with me a lot of folks that I've worked with over the years who are going to help us describe to you the certain ins and outs of C-arm operation, the safety aspects, etc. And so we're just simply going to introduce ourselves. We have Jeff Hand. He's a PA here at Holy Cross with us, and Dominic Chiappetta, and Taiwan Guns, aka TG, Evelyn, and then Michelle, who's been with us for at least 8 years operating the C-arm, and is really probably one of the most knowledgeable people I've run into in terms of C-arm operation. And then, of course, myself, and filming is Halim Abdul, our research scientist and genius. Welcome. First things we're going to talk about, we made a little list. How does the C-arm work? And this is basically like a flashlight, is the way to think about it. And what I think about when I'm operating this thing is that I've got a light source, and this light goes through people. It's X-ray, and it's projected onto this screen here, and it's like literally a flashlight coming through the patient and projecting onto the screen, and then this screen, called the image intensifier, is transmitted over here, and you can see we just took a shot of someone's hands, and luckily there's very little arthritis there. But that's basically how it works. And just with flashlights, the same thing, like if you have a flashlight that has a wide spread, everyone gets the light, versus a spot where very few people get the light. And you can cone, you think of the performance, you can cone it down and just have it very, very tight. When it's tight, that means no one else is getting the light and no one else is getting the radiation, which is key to the whole concept. So basically, what we call the X-ray source, which is this round thing here, passes through the patient to the image intensifier and then is transmitted up. At a certain point, when it takes a picture, the C-arm does this. It looks for having enough radiation, and then it turns off. And it balances automatically in its brain how much energy it's pushing through. So if the patient is very large, or if there's a lot of density or a lot of metal, then it will push harder, and it will send more X-ray energy through. If the patient is light, or if it's just air, it'll just send just a tiny little bit through. And so bigger patients require more energy. And that's why on the pedal we actually have a more energy button. This is a stronger flashlight. This is a weaker flashlight. And so it also finds, so if the practitioner's hands get inside and he's wearing a lead glove, or she, and it sees that, it will increase the amount of radiation, so all the more reason to try and keep the practitioner's hands out of the beam. So that's basically how it works. There's something called dose, and we have these things called dosimeters, and these collect the amount of radiation we get on the outside of our lead. We have it on the inside of our lead. I even wear one on my ring, and it stores, based on my social security number, how much radiation I've received over my lifetime, and everyone has one on there, and it stores. So if you're wearing someone else's, say Dr. Wu, my partner, Dr. Wu's dosimeter is getting the radiation, it goes on his report. So it's really important not to ever wear someone else's. And if you're going to borrow someone's lead, take it off and leave it there if you don't have your own dosimeter. Over time, radiation damages our cells by causing degradation of the DNA, because the energy happens to have the same wavelength as our DNA, which is the problem with radiation. The more damage to the DNA, the more likelihood there's going to be cancer. So that's why we wear thyroid collars, the full vest, etc. The parts of our body that are of greatest importance are the places where there's highest cell turnover. So like your thyroid gland, reproductive organs, even your stomach. So that's why, your brain, quite honestly, there's very, very little cell turnover. And that's why you can usually keep your head and face exposed. Your eyes, you keep them covered with with goggles, and I'll put mine on here because you can get cataracts. It'll affect the lens within your eye. But the hands, for example, and arms and legs and feet, generally there's very little cell turnover, and so the risk of radiation is really about 1/50th per dose exposure as it would be for your thyroid, for example. So if you had to only wear one thing, you wear your thyroid, and then you wear something over your loins. You can see that I'm wearing a full wraparound, so is Michelle. The reason we wear the full wraparound, or prefer it, is that with the, and Dominic, just turn around with yours if you can. You can see on this one, there's no lead here. And so if he is facing away from the C-arm, let's say preparing some medicine or something, and the beam comes out, the scatter we call it comes out, it goes through Dominic, hits his lead, and then bounces back through Dominic. So Dominic actually gets twice as much radiation as if he were facing the C-arm. So the wraparound, you know, if you're in the room a lot, it really, really cuts down on your exposure. So I recommend the wraparound, and I wear it, and so does Dr. Wood, and, you know, folks that are in here. But if you're in here casually, just visiting, etc., and as long as you're facing the C-arm, then you're fine. If you face the C-arm, it's just the same. Oops. But dose is cumulative. And with the dose you got as a kid, the doses you got here while you're here, it will affect you throughout the rest of your life. And so that is why, you know, you may say, I didn't get much today. Well, it doesn't really matter. It's what you get over a lifetime. And if you want to be doing this thing as a doctor or as a serum tech, you got to protect yourself.
I have a question, Doctor.
Sure.
Comparatively speaking, would be roughly the amount of rads from a C-arm exposure compared to a regular AP and lateral, let's say in a hospital,
Very
lumbar
good.
spine.
Great question.
Does that have a lot more rad for that when you have an AP and lateral?
Much less. But, you know, previously, say a regular plain film X-ray that we used to get, one shot of the C-arm is equal to about 1/100th of a regular X-ray exposure.
1/100th.
1/100th. One X-ray exposure is about 1/2000th of a CAT scan. So one fluoro is about 1/2 millionth of a CAT scan. So you'd have to have 2 million fluoro shots to equal one CT scan. Now that said, I've probably taken 2 million fluoro shots. Luckily not of myself. But a CAT scan, we know, increases your risk of cancer by about 1%. Each CAT scan you have. So the patient who's getting most of this, and they're getting really 100 times more than we are. If you look at my dosimeter badge versus Michelle's, who's operating the C-arm, you know, she may get 2 or 3 millirads a month. I will get 50 to 100 on the outside of my lead. Now on the inside of my lead, it drops it by, again, almost 1,000th. I almost get nothing on the inside. But that doesn't mean the arms. The arms are still getting it. My face is getting it. My brain is getting it. My feet are getting it. You can also see that we have these down here. That's also to limit scatter. And scatter is that stuff. Imagine if you got your flashlight and it's coned down in a dark room, there is, other than just where the spot is, there is light. And that scatter comes out of the patient, and then it comes out like this. It bounces off the image intensifier, bounces off the table. This reduces the scatter a bit, and it protects our legs and our feet quite a bit. So even keeping your feet, if the pedal's under here, you're getting a whole lot more than if the pedal's out here, your feet are. I mean, it cuts it down a lot. And when you do a cross-table lateral, then you don't have this benefit. The other thing, I mean, this is the most dangerous part in the whole machine right here. This is the X-ray source. And so it's interesting to note that when you are taking a lateral, if your doc is standing like this and doing a procedure, this position is 8 times the amount of radiation than under the table. And this position, you can just guide your doc to say, hey, doc, stand behind, you know, or do something like this, then take a picture. This is almost 0 standing behind the flashlight compared to next to the flashlight. So, I mean, and it's a big deal. And we know that docs who have do a lot of kyphoplasty, a lot of laterals, they can have dramatically higher exposures, even doing fewer procedures, just because of where they are. Any questions? The other thing is distance. So the distance is, and this is kind of a hard concept, is 1 over the radius to the 3rd power. So that means that for every foot I stand back, I get literally almost 1/9 of the radiation. So that if you are more than 6 feet from this, you really don't even need lead. And that's why we don't have a lead-lined building. We don't have a lead-lined floor. The people downstairs are safe. The people upstairs, the people outside are safe. At 6 feet, it's equal to the same radiation you would get from standing in the sun with it constantly on. So it drops precipitously down. So if someone's walking through, they don't need lead. If you're in the corner, you don't need lead. But if you're here, you need lead. And if you're here, you really need lead unless you're the patient. So distance is king. The other thing is something called collimation. And collimation is simply like taking your hand over that cone of light that's coming out and getting an even smaller cone. And the radiation is then soaked up by the column and it's projected into a small picture here. It's really, really, really important that you collimate. If you take a picture, let's take a picture right here. Let's do no collimation, actually, Michelle. Okay, so what we see, what happens is, without any collimation, the cone of light comes out here and is bigger than the image intensifier. With one button press, just collimate one click, you can see it comes down here just a little bit. All of a sudden it went from out here to this. So one click of the column will cut your radiation by almost 50%, which is major. So always, always, always collimate. And even more, let's say we collimate down here, you will cut the exposure down really almost 60, 70, 80%, maybe even 90% with very tight collimation. When we're doing cervical procedures, sometimes we'll do very, very tight collimation because our fingers are really close to the needle to direct to be as safe as possible. So if we collimate a whole lot, you can take a picture, you can see none of this out here is really getting much exposure at all. In fact, all of us got a dramatically less dose, the patient got a less dose, the operator got a less dose. And dose is everything. So the other thing is direction. Like we were talking about, if it is pointing away from you, just like think of the flashlight again. If it's pointing away from you, you're going to get less than if it's, say, pointing towards you, unless it's super collimated. And that's like, if so it's pointing like this towards me, Michelle, I'd like her to collimate a little more, usually. There's a button called low dose on almost all C-arms. It cuts your radiation, again, by about 60 to 70%, just by keeping that button on. You sacrifice image quality a little bit because it's just turning, it's like putting one battery in the flashlight versus two. But for what we do, we can generally, we need just the information. We don't need a beautiful picture. That's all we need is the base information. So low dose, always on, all the time, unless we ask for it off. And the other thing that we like is pulse on. Pulse is this other button right here, and what it does is when you are taking live fluoro, live it's constantly going, and it's really pulses per second, and so when it's on, it's about 30 pulses per second. You can set in the settings how many pulses. Our fluoro, when we put it on that, goes to 8 pulses per second, so it drops it way down, which is so if you're doing live, say with spinal cord stimulation, the doctor's feeding the lead up there and he's heavy on the pedal, put it on pulse, unless they ask for otherwise, of course. But that will greatly cut down on that. Where I talked about laterals. There is another thing called digital subtraction angiography. We have 2 C-arms with it. One of them does not have it. This one does have it. Just so you understand what it is. DSA takes a picture, and what we do is we click the blue button and then we stand on the pedal. And when we inject the contrast, it superimposes the thing that's different in the picture 2 from the things that are the same in the picture 2. So if we took a picture like this of you guys standing there, the second picture was without Tawana, all you'd see is everything, but you'd see Tawana moving. And so what it does is it takes away all the distracting anatomy, and all you see would be contrast, say, going through a vein or an artery. So when you're looking, you have a suspicion that you are in an artery or a vein, which is really important. You don't want to be. Not only will the medicine not go where you want it, but it can actually harm the patient a lot. You want to make sure that you use DSA. And so for cervical procedures, we use DSA quite a bit if we have any question. If we're going on the left side of the lumbar spine high, or in the thoracic spine, where there's a particular artery called the artery of Adamkowitz, we want to make sure we're not in that artery. Or in a vein for, and there are a lot of veins everywhere, because the medicine will go where we want it, but in these arteries we can really damage the spinal cord and or the brain. It can actually cause a stroke if we inject, say, particulate medicine into these arteries. So we use DSA. So next we're going to talk about concepts of C-arm operation. The first thing is to understand the anatomy. And this is the most difficult part of the operation, because really, you can use this thing well, but if you don't understand what this thing is, then, or the elbow, or the arm, or the leg, or the head, then you won't know what your doctor is going after. And so, basically, if you understand the target, and you understand where you're going in reference to the target, and you understand the anatomy, then you'll be able to predict where the doctor's going to go next. So let's say we blocked the facet joint nerve right here And we always do things the exact same way in all of our procedures, so that it's just like, you know, I would say it's like a Japanese tea ceremony. It's always the same unless there's something just very bizarre. But that way we always know where we're going to go next. And you don't have to talk about it. It's no decision making, etc. It's just a dance, and you're doing the same dance every time. But so Michelle would know, say, like at this one, this would be the L5 transverse process. I block this nerve. She knows I'm going to go here. So the next move she has, she wants me to see the needle where it is, so I can see where it is here. And then she will also try and image this next piece of anatomy, which is the L4 transverse process. Get them in the same picture, so that I can see where I am, so that and where I'm going to go, so I can direct the needle very easily. But once you understand the anatomy, and we'll go over that here in a little bit, then you can make decisions about how to move to the next part of the procedure, and the doctor doesn't have to tell you.